looking at some apartments in Kiev, and I wanted to make this video to show you how apartments and private real estate works here in Kiev and I guess in Eastern Europe. Is that the first thing is that you buy an apartment without anything. I mean, there's no remodeling, nothing. You buy it just like with pretty much bricks and stones. And so that is the price that you get. And so here they have a lot of things here. They have a lot of buildings. And so as you can see, there's kind of these shorter 4-story buildings that you see over there. And then towards that side you see a little bit taller buildings. And so me personally, I'm a big fan of not really tall buildings. I cannot imagine living in a tall skyscraper kind of thing. I don't think that's very human. And so in my opinion, these shorter ones are pretty cool. But these are also pretty cool, right? They're not that tall, because here in Kiev and in Ukraine they have a lot of these real estate developments going on, and they have tall buildings, they have shorter buildings. But for the most part you see a lot of these tall buildings with like 30, 40, 50 stories, and I personally would never live there. And so obviously this would look a lot better in the summer. You have to take into account this is winter. And so let's talk about real estate in Ukraine. Why do people buy real estate? Well, first of all, it gives you stability. You buy an apartment, it's yours. Nobody can kick you out. The second thing is security. All of this is secure, and it's locked in. There's a gate. They only let people who live here or work here. It's not like in the middle of the city where you're wide open. The other thing about it is that you have privacy. Okay, everybody's they kind of know each other. You're living around well-to-do neighbors, essentially people who can afford apartments. So you're not living next to somebody who is just living there by sheer luck and accident. And so there's a lot of advantages. And unlike New York City, a lot of people choose to buy apartments here. This was a really big deal for me when I was coming in. I was like, why? I was used to renting, and here people are mostly buying things. And now I understand why. And so an apartment that's around 50 square meters is around $50,000. Okay, but you still have to remodel it. You still have to put money in it, and that's gonna cost around a half of that, roughly, right? So you spend $50K for an apartment, and then you have to spend another $25K to remodel it or more. So that's around $75,000, $80,000 together. And so that is kind of the overall thing. And so we're gonna walk around here for a little bit, just gonna get the feel for this place. And so I want to show you something. In the distance you see that they're building new buildings, and these are tall buildings, and this is kind of very typical here. They're very tall, and we're gonna pass by them later on, and so I'm gonna show you them up close. But these are the kind of buildings I would probably not want to live in, because they're very inhumane. I think it's like a lot of people living in a tall building, and it's not. Whereas if you look at these buildings, they're not very tall, they're a little bit more cozy, which I think is an advantage for this specific complex. So another thing I want to point out is that this complex, it comes with pretty much everything. Here you have Nova Pochta, which is a private courier delivery business, pretty ubiquitous in Ukraine. And so when you buy a place in this complex, you have everything. You have restaurants, you have some coffee shops, you have a lot of interesting things that you have to take into account. I mean, where else are you gonna buy an apartment and have like a post office, branch of the post office right there? That's pretty cool, actually. So that saves a lot of time and money. I know I use the service a lot, everybody does, and so it makes things a lot easier. So check this out, that building, that house that you see, beyond the fence is somebody who did not want to sell, and as a result they were left in the middle of this. They were offered to sell. I don't know if they were given a good price and value or not, but they refused to sell, and as a result there's this house that's kind of in the middle. So let's see if we can walk around through this, and let's see if I can show you it up close, if we can see something beyond the fence here. But that's kind of interesting, is that you have this huge complex here, and they obviously have to build it, but they couldn't. And so you can see it from this angle here, that they wanted to sell. It's kind of funny. Otherwise it looks like a pretty cool complex here, but this person did not want to sell, and as a result they're kind of in the middle. I wonder where the exit is. I wonder how they exit their own house. So we just had coffee in this place, and this is something I was thinking about, is that when you move here, you're never gonna be really going outside the boundaries here, because all you're gonna be doing is having coffee here, eating here, getting your stuff delivered, etc., etc. You're never gonna, on rare occasions, probably once a week or maybe a couple of times a month, you might want to go outside this complex, because you kind of have everything here. And so it's kind of both a pro and a con, something you have to think about if that's the kind of life that you want. But if you think about it, like if you look at this complex here, if you look how nice it looks here, look at this other complex that they're building just across the street, and that complex, this is a perfect example of the stuff that I don't like. These tall buildings, these anonymous apartment complexes. And so this is the big advantage this place has, is that it's a little bit more cozier than some of the other places, and this is what I like about it. And so as you can see, this is private territory, it's guarded territory. Cars, people, they need either to be living here or they need to be invited by somebody else. So for delivery, you tell the security that you're expecting delivery and they are gonna open the door. But generally, if you don't have business here, you will not be able to just walk in, which is, I think, is a good thing, especially in Eastern Europe. That is a positive thing. And they even have a fitness club here. They have a gym as well. And so you kind of have everything here. Everything that you might need. Or so as you can see, there's a couple of other complexes here. This is one that's next to it, and this one is called the Royal House, and I gotta admit, it looks a little bit better. It looks a little bit nicer. It has that British theme on it, with that the red British phone booth and the British bus as well over there. And so you have a couple of options depending on what you're looking into. The only thing I don't know is that it looks pretty good from the outside, but I do not know what it's like on the inside, and so that is something you kind of have to understand. And so here's another one across the street. It's another complex. It looks pretty decent. It's another new complex, and I have to say that I'm kind of happy that they're building new things in Ukraine to replace those aging old Soviet era buildings. And so that was a fun day. Checked out some new opportunities here. now you have to think about, it's a complete change of living, coming from the center and moving God knows where, outside the center, close to the border of Kiev, close to a regional airport, which could be a nice plus if only that airport had more flights. And so you have a little bit of noise every now and then, you have some noise, but for the most part it's not bad at all. And so you have to think about the pros and the cons of such a move. What kind of person you are. Are you somebody that likes to live in the center? Are you somebody that likes to live, wherever, that kind of thing? You kind of have to think about. Me, I'm kind of a city guy, so it's always tough for me to go out beyond the downtown area, the central perimeter, and to even consider an opportunity to live there. But just like with anything, there are pros to cons to anything, and that is something you have to think about. And so we are walking towards the metro station from the buildings. And one thing you have to understand, this is really big in Ukraine, is that when you are in the territory, it's all nice and beautiful. But the moment you leave, you're back in the city. And since you're no longer in the center, you're not gonna have nice things around you. You're gonna have something like this. You're not gonna have beautiful things. So that is something to keep in mind. The other thing about it is obviously the traffic. As you can see, it's not even rush hour yet, but there's traffic. Cars are stuck, it's really slow, tons of cars here. And why is that? Because people are moving to these places. They're buying apartments in these complexes. But most of them still work in the center, obviously. And as a result, you're gonna have a lot of traffic. So what is my point? My point is that there's no free lunch. There's no free lunch. If you want nice things, you want to live in a nice apartment, there's some trade-offs. Otherwise, if you want to live in the center, there are some pros and cons. But the reason I wanted to talk about this, because this only applies to Eastern Europe. Obviously, if you're buying a house in the United States or in Western Europe, it's not gonna look like this whenever you leave your house. It's gonna look beautiful and it's gonna be nice. So this is something to keep in mind when you are looking for something to do something like this in Eastern Europe. So now we're back in the center, and take a look at this. Take a look at this. This is what you see walking around. And so the question is, do you want to live somewhere where it doesn't look as nice as this, where you're walking and you're like, well, I have a nice apartment, I have a nice complex, but when I walk around, that's pretty much it. So one of the main reasons that I like Kiev is because of the architecture, and living in the center is amazing because it's beautiful around. You have a lot of these historical buildings. It's just, it's a beautiful place. A lot more beautiful than a lot of the United States suburbia, for instance. Even a lot of the main cities in the US. Maybe except San Francisco or something, when it comes to that. And so that's the main question. Priorities. What is more important to you? Where are your priorities? What do you value the most? And that is something you kind of have to decide. Because unfortunately, you can't have it both ways here. You can't have it both ways.